Welcome back, everybody, to the Lead Up Podcast, where we connect with dope and diverse leaders to learn more about their leadership journey so you can level up your leadership. Hashtag Lead Up. As always, I want to give a special shout out to Darling New Media, Sacramento's premier podcast studios, here to tell your story. And they are located in Midtown Sacramento. Make sure to check out their services at darlingnewmedia.com. Also, can't forget about you, the listeners, for tuning in, checking out the podcast, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening in your car or at the gym. Just want to say thank you for checking us out and tuning in. This is episode 42, and I'm going to introduce my guest very shortly. But I also want to do something a little bit different. There's been a lot of, if you even just turn on the news or go on social media, there's been a lot of tragic things happening in our world. More recently, of what happened in Texas. One of my good friends and recent podcast guest, Carmen Ross, shared a couple links for folks that want to do something, right? Take some action to support what's happened not only in Texas, but also in Buffalo, and many other things that are happening. But of course, heart is heavy, and definitely want to make space for that and give you the opportunity for folks to support and help and take some action. So make sure to check out the links that I'll be posting in the show notes at the end of this podcast. And next, what I want to do is introduce somebody that I've had the privilege to get to know, not only work alongside with a couple projects, but really connect. And it's just funny because for those that aren't aware, if I haven't mentioned it before, I recently, or not recently, about 3 months ago, I ruptured my Achilles, and which is the reason why I'm recording from home. But come to find out, my guest, Mr. Chris Cooper here, also ruptured his Achilles a couple years ago, and just at the timing where I was, very early stages of like, man, like this is super unfortunate, inconvenient. He really encouraged me during that time, like, bro, like this happened to me, like, and he's been checking in on me and supporting me and encouraging me along the way. So just kind of crazy how it's all worked out to not only along the way build a friendship and now a working relationship, but now just also along the way just as a friend, as a peer, someone that I look up to. So without further ado, I want to welcome to the Leader Podcast, Chris Cooper. Welcome, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Honestly, just being here in this space right now came in heavy. Now I feel a little light load on me just being in this space. You're giving me energy already, so I'm happy to be here. Thank you, brother.
For sure. I appreciate you, man, and appreciate the energy that you've given me the last really few months through this injury and recovery. So I greatly appreciate you, man. But really want to give this time to you, man, just to share who is Chris Cooper, man. I love to hear more about. I know some bits and pieces about your story, where you're from, South Sac, but give the people a little bit more about how you grew up, kind of your background, and kind of a little bit more about your journey of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. Well, first, I'm an Achilles tendon rupture survivor. It's so funny. I actually forgot that you're actually going through it for like a quick second. I know I've been checking in when you just making sure that you're good, but actually for a minute, I actually forgot. So I hope it's going well. It's an interesting journey. Yeah. For everyone who's listening, my name is Chris Cooper. I like to always lean in with where I come from. I'm from South Sacramento. It's a big part of who I am and how I lean in with every introduction. I don't ever forget where I come from because it's the people that I've been connected with where I'm from. It's the things I've experienced that all have contributed to my identity. I mentioned growing up in South Sac. That was kind of, I would say, it's always been, when I reflect on my childhood, there's always a piece of trauma that I find myself not letting go that has contributed to my resilience. And really what that trauma in part has looked like is navigating through poverty, right? Navigating through violence, indirect or directly. Seeing my family members go through what they had went through. And all these different pieces of trauma. So I just wanted to lift that up. And then also the resilience of it. Went to Sac High. So shout out to my Sac High.
Hey, shout out to the Dragons. Let's go.
I know. Grew up in South Sac, but I actually went to high school in Oak Park. So that was an interesting dynamic.
Right.
So I was lucky enough to to become a dragon, and even then it was a hard hit with the violence, and I
Mhm,
keep mentioning the violence piece because it really what has shaped my interest professionally,
mhm,
and my passion too as well. Had a teammate who was tragically shot, and it really shaped like what leadership means for me. I was that
mhm.
weird guy that played football. Everybody, hey, Coop, you ain't got nothing to say, man. Get out of here. But they wanted to see what I would do on the field. But when that teammate passed away tragically, that was really a defining moment for my leadership. I'm sure, well, we can talk a little bit more about those leadership qualities later. But I would say that's me. I would throw out there, aside from just like work related and professionalism and all these other aspects of who I am. I'm a huge 49ers fan.
Let's go.
I love to eat good food. I love to travel. I always try my best to at least go to one international destination per year. Um, wow, what else about me? I'm a retired high school football player. Retired. I know not a lot of folks say retired high school football.
Right.
Shout out to all the high school football enthusiasts out there. But yeah, I'll leave it at that.
That's awesome, man. Actually didn't know you went to Sac High. Funny enough,
Yeah.
I when I first moved to Sacramento, my first job was working as a paraeducator at Sac High in
Hmm.
2015. So
Yeah.
kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, learned a lot from my experience too in a community like Oak Park,
Yeah.
which, to your point, when it comes to violence and all the kind of really craziness that's going on in our world and working with youth. A lot of,
Yeah.
we kind of share that similarity of being educators and working with youth, different approaches, different um, services, but, typically the same population that we're serving, right? Whether it's young men of color,
Yeah.
young women of color, first generation students to going to college.
Hmm.
Um, I'm curious to dig in a little bit more into, I know you mentioned about your teammate and kind of the views of leadership, right?
Yeah.
We've connected for the last maybe year and a half, 2 years. I would say on and off a little bit more before that, but more recently, we've got to work alongside each other on some cool projects and
Yeah.
do some things. But I'm curious to learn more about like how your leadership view has changed over the last few years, either in your own professional journey. I know you mentioned your teammate, so that when you were a student. So I'm curious, what were some of the biggest changes in your leadership development and how you view leadership as a whole?
Yeah. You know what's interesting? Growing up in the church, I feel like my first representation of leadership, and I mentioned the word representation because in leadership, I was always looking for someone that looked like me.
Hmm.
And for some reason, if I didn't see anyone that looked like me, it wasn't leadership actually.
Wow.
So growing up, the only representation that I had of leadership, whatever, you know, however way folks define leadership, was in the
Hmm.
church, right?
Right.
So I actually grew up seeing the preacher and the pastors preaching, thinking, "Wow, I'm 5 years old. I'm looking at Pastor Bishop said that's what
Yeah.
leadership is. He's
Mm.
speaking, right?" So I actually grew up really wanting to speak, speaking, and I thought, that was leadership. I think my thought process of what leadership was evolved when I started to learn about service, right?
Mm.
In service without the speaking. What does that look
Wow.
like when we're
Whew.
leading and it has nothing to do
Yeah.
about what you're saying, but actually what
Wow.
you're doing? And maybe what you're doing when you're not on the stage. Maybe what
Wow.
you're doing when you're not on the podcast. Maybe what you're doing when no one else is looking. So I feel like uh, how I've processed leadership in the development in how like leadership has evolved for me and how
Hmm.
I process it is really it's been more um, I would say service oriented, service
Yeah.
centered.
Yeah.
And I think once I started to understand, like Chris, like you got to clean some toilets,
Mm.
right? You might need to clean some toilets before you're ever acknowledged as a leader, right? And I want to also stress, and I'll pause, is that I really want to I have to really encourage and check myself and say, Chris, leadership starts at home, and that's a whole
Mm.
nother thing we need to
Right.
start really diving into. Is when we think about leadership, we think about who we are when we clock in. right?
Yeah.
Who we are in front of people we really don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but the biggest question is leadership at home.
Wow.
And really, my heart goes out to Buffalo. My heart goes out to Texas. My heart goes out to even these pockets locally of everyone
Yeah.
that's really battling and grappling with tragedy.
Hmm.
Because the thing that hits us hardest are these really traumatic events that happen to our family
Yeah.
and these parents who feel like they're failing at leading their home,
Wow.
right? And that's the biggest part is the leadership at home. So to answer your question, I would say leadership has changed for me from being a kid aspiring to be that preacher in that three-piece suit with the gaiters on, speaking so eloquently, to now saying, Chris, leadership is not that actually. It's
Mm.
something else, and it actually starts at home.
Wow. Man, you said a lot of great things there, and it's really deep. Uh, Leadership starting at home. Uh, I want you to elaborate that a little bit because, again, we got a lot of people that tune in. Maybe young professionals, young adults, maybe some older folks as well. Some of them, they don't have kids, they're not married. Some of that, even, it's a whole different conversation of how the family dynamic is changing. But what would you say to those? Like, what does that look like for leadership at home for maybe that young professional, that person that's in college? Maybe their home life is different than how they were in high school, but now it's, what I'm saying? So, what would you say to them? What does that look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. As you were asking me that question, I was thinking of priorities. And
Mm,
I was thinking about how one of the biggest attributes of leadership is knowing how to prioritize.
yeah.
And actually, if you think about it, even at a very young age, we start to learn how to prioritize. We might
Mm,
not prioritize right, right? I'm thinking of that little baby, or even my son. He's 11 months, and he already loves to eat. He's more inclined to pick up. Uh, he's more inclined to maybe pick up that piece of candy than that broccoli right now, even at 11 months, right?
mm,
So he's prioritizing candy over vegetables, right? And I feel like we end up doing that. We end up choosing what we call the flesh. We end up choosing that
hmm.
thing um, that it brings us that quick and easy pleasure. So
Mm,
I would say what that looks like is prioritizing the right way.
yeah.
That goes down to budgeting, right? You might need to skip out on those new shoes that just dropped.
Yeah.
Like literally, you might need to skip out on that and prioritize something else.
Yeah.
Or me and you, we love festivals. We love music festivals. Listen, I will put my last. If you put a festival lineup and
Yeah.
Kendrick's in the lineup, J. Cole's in the lineup, Nas is in the lineup.
Yeah.
Shoot, who else? If you just pack that lineup fire,
Yeah.
and the most expensive VIP ticket is $1,200,
Yeah.
I might just do it.
Drop the 12. Yeah.
Yep. So, but hey, that's not priority though. Rent might be priority, or if you own a home, mortgage might be priority. Cell phone bills are hurting people
Right.
nowadays.
That's real.
Shout out to everybody that's on my family plan. We gotta we gotta pay that bill. We have to pay that. Come together, get that T-Mobile bill paid. So when I think
Yeah.
about leadership, I think when like Chris, what does leadership look like? Prioritize, prioritize, prioritize. Do
Wow.
what you need to do. And in this moment, and it's so funny, when you're really against the wall as a leader, you have no choice but to prioritize the right thing.
Mm,
And 10 times out of
that's
10,
real,
and 10
man.
times out of 10, you're going to prioritize your family. But don't
Hmm.
wait to be against the wall.
Mm,
You don't have to wait to be against the wall to start prioritizing things the right way. Oh, dang, I should have just went ahead and made sure I
yeah.
had health insurance.
Mm,
Right? Don't wait till it's too late. You done rupture your Achilles tendon. Now you got now you got to go to Kaiser
right.
and figure stuff out. So I
Yeah.
would say what leadership tends to look like is having proactive prioritization. I'm
Wow.
flipping, messing with my prioritize in a
Yeah.
proactive way is what I'm saying.
I
How
love
do
that.
we prioritize in a proactive way? So I feel like that's what leadership looks like. Lastly, I'll put a little bit of business out there in my business. And I think this is good because it actually might help folks. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Um, which is when I was young and I had first started, me and my wife were just recently married. I remember rent being it was I think our rent was like $7.99 a month,
Oof.
right? And I remember making around 900 and something a month. And as a new husband, I'm young. I'm 20, I'm like 21 years old. I'm like,
Wow.
one, I got married and I got married broke, right? But hey, we're married and we're broke.
Yeah.
So let's
Yeah.
figure this out.
Yeah.
And as I think back on it, my priorities were not in the right place. And
Hmm.
I didn't have to put myself in that situation and I didn't have to put my wife in that situation. So through that process, I really had to, when I think about like, Chris, how did you get out of that situation? Rent was $7.99, but you was bringing home like $9.60 a month. How did you get
Right.
out of that situation? When I look back on it, all I did was reshape my priorities.
Yeah.
And I was able to lead me and my wife, out of that situation.
Yeah.
And we're just so blessed to be in the situation that we're in right now. We were able to close on our home. We just became homeowners.
Let's
And I'm just
go.
like, every time I think about like Chris, like God is so good. Like, how did you do this? I'm reminded of what I just mentioned: priorities, and kind of reshaping the journey that way.
Wow. Man, thank you for sharing that. That sounded like you're against the wall moment.
Yeah.
Back in the, yeah, what you say, married and broke, right?
Yep.
Um, man, what are, I know that was something that happened previously, and even now with a lot of things, as you mentioned, a lot of heaviness, and a lot of people, still trying to figure out like how to deal with the outside world or all the different challenges and stresses of life. What are some of the things that inspires you in challenging moments, like when you have those seasons or days or just like instances where you're like, man, not sure if I want to do this right now. Going back to kind of like what are ways that you get yourself motivated, inspired to get back on track and go after your priorities and your goals?
Yeah. So I guess what you're asking is like, how do I reach that point of encouragement?
Yeah, yeah. How do you get yourself back on track, or what are
Yeah.
ways for you to get back and get that inspiration to kind of keep going?
Yeah. I would say one, it's many things. Um, I would say the first thing being self care, and I know there's a lot out there like, oh, self care, self care. I feel like everyone preaches self care, but like really honestly, I practice that too, like real life. Like
Yeah,
I really try to refocus and recenter myself in what I believe um, will get me back there and make sure that I'm taking care of myself,
yeah.
like the 15 minutes of meditation I had before joining this podcast. I felt so
Mm.
cluttered before joining. And I was like, Chris, you gotta just like, actually I was listening to Israel Houghton. That's why I kind of joined, ended up preaching before we started. And I'm just like, so sleep
Yeah,
can be something that I do to refocus. These are all like small detailed things. Um, but no, to be honest, I would say I'm the type of person, I really appreciate community. And when I say that, I would say being around people.
yeah.
I really don't have the type of personality. I know folks like this, like, leave me alone. I don't want to be around nobody. Like, I
Hmm.
just need to be by myself. And that's how they recharge. I really recharge by coming together in community and coming
Yeah.
around people. And I'm my dad's only child. I was raised by a single father in South Sacramento. And there was many parts of my childhood where I was lonely. And um, I, I, I think the way I kind of get back and get recharged and recentered is really connecting with people. And sometimes I don't do the best job at picking up my phone and saying, "Hey, let's go to the movies," or let's go to Top Golf," or let's go wherever we want to go to convene. But I have to, I have to do that more. I'm not the best at it the most, but I would say coming together in the community and being around people, connecting with people.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said this about community because, and I think some other guests have mentioned or have touched on it, but not explicitly said the word community, and that's something I value very strongly in my own personal life, and I don't think that's something that that gets talked about often. because there's a difference too about, I would say you have, maybe your friends, you have colleagues, coworkers, acquaintances, but then you have your community, like a healthy community where you can really have as an outlet to share things that
Mhm.
you're thinking about, things that's on your heart, that can be, where you can be vulnerable, right? And where you can feel safe at the same time. And I don't know if a lot of people have a community that they can tap into. And I think sometimes, as whether you're a leader or you're trying to aspire to do great things, you may think, oh, I don't need it, but I need to find a way to do it myself to prove that I am a leader,
Mhm.
to prove that I can do it by myself. But I say this a lot to a lot of college students when they're excited to go to college for the first time of like, oh, I can't wait for my independence. And I just kind of remind them like, hey, independence doesn't mean isolation, right?
Mm.
Right? Independence is great. It's a great way to mature and learn new responsibilities. But if you're doing it in isolation, that's very scary, right?
Mm.
Because now you're just swimming in open water when really you could have been, with your life raft. You got your buddies that could throw you a boat,
Mhm.
right? And you know what I'm saying? Like that's your community. So kind of went on a little bit too much here, but talk to me about the importance of community and why people should really lean into that and finding their folks.
Yeah. Wow. No, that was just amazing because the thing is I do believe there's a reason why it's not you only in this world. You are not Will Smith and I Am Legend. You're not. You're not. There's a reason why you have neighbors. There's a reason why. Go ahead and just knock on the door if you don't got sugar. No, I'm just playing. Don't do that. If you have a nice neighbor, do it. But if you don't, then don't do it. But I
Yeah.
think there's a reason why we have classmates. I think there's a reason why we have colleagues. I think there's a reason why we get on the road and maybe you have road rage because you're driving right next to somebody. Maybe they cut you off. There's
Right.
a reason for all that, right? I think it's orchestrated perfectly, but we're not all the importance of it um, is that together is how impact happens,
Yeah.
right? That's really the truth, and it's how we come together is really where healing is,
Yeah.
right? Like, man, I think I'm about to get so deep here. When we are wounded, it takes so many orchestrating parts for
Yeah.
everything to come back together,
Right.
right? Both of us, our Achilles tendon that was ruptured, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it never was just one thing to get that tendon to come back together and rejoin, right?
Mm. Okay,
So
preacher, come on.
no, I think I'm preaching right now. So what I'm saying is that in times of tragedy, in times when we need to heal, in times where we need life, in times when we're learning, in times to where we're wanting to develop, yes, we can do that maybe independently, but we
Yeah.
can't reach a final destination alone. There's no final destination anywhere in life alone, period. Me today, I am here really on the backs of my parents and everything that
Mm.
they sacrificed for me.
So
There's
good.
nothing isolated in that,
Right.
right? Everyone who's invested in me, everyone who's given me an opportunity to do the work that I do, I didn't do that alone. Something was passed down that I took advantage of. So, to your point, I just feel like, yeah, you can't do this isolated. That's not healthy. That's not ideal. Um, and don't knock it. Still, please take time for yourself,
Of
right?
course. Definitely.
Like some stuff does need to be done in isolation, and then some stuff does need to kind of come back and get into community and tap in with your people.
Yeah. Yeah. No, one thing you mentioned earlier on in your response about impact, I would love to hear more about the impact that you've made in your community and the roles that you played. I know you recently had a transition professionally as well. I'm super excited about that. So, love to hear more about maybe about that transition and the impact you played in your own community of South Sacramento, but even Sacramento on a larger scale as well.
Yeah, no, that's good. No, I think when I started my introduction, I think I stopped at high school. I could have kept going, but we probably would have got the podcast started. So, yeah, so in terms of the impact that I've made, again, collectively with amazing people, I would say started rooted honestly within South Sac. I had a part time job, it was a summer job, and I was lucky enough to get my feet wet at a middle school called James Verder Middle School in
Hey, shout
South
out to
Sac.
James Rudder.
Yes, off of Florin Road. It was honestly it was a 4-week position through an organization, and it was not permanent, completely summer job. And there was a black principal at the time who gave me an opportunity to permanently serve an after school program. That changed
Mm,
everything for me.
wow.
And I was able to impact so many hard headed middle schoolers
Yep.
who needed the credits to get ready for high school, and I loved it. I
Yeah.
loved it and I embraced it. And believe it or not, I still talk to some of those students in I'll go into a random Walmart. Hey, Mr. Cooper.
Right,
And they're like,
right.
hey, you remember me? And I'm like, yo, you taller than me now. You got like 2 kids. Like you're grown. No, I'm sorry, I don't remember you, but I love you, kid. you know. Um,
That's funny.
so I would say the foundation of the impact that I was made in a
Mhm,
lot of my experience, and the majority of it is impacting young students. And I did a lot of impact in the K through 12th grade system, but I
mhm,
actually didn't go on to get my teaching credential. And that was a huge question mark for me. Like, Chris, are you going to go on and get your teaching credential, become an administrator, and different things like that? And I actually ended up saying no. Let's leave the school system. I was actually recruited by one of my youth pastors at the time that was kind of a former past youth pastor at the time. His name is D'Angelo Mack. Let's go ahead and put him on the
hey,
spot.
yes,
And
shout out to D-Lo Mac, man.
yes, and D'Angelo at the time was running, in fact, one of the first, if not the first, hospital-based violence intervention program in Sacramento County. And I was lucky enough to do that work and support those that were violently injured, shot, stabbed, or assaulted. That was impact too, because we were able to come in contact with hundreds of young people that did not lose their life, but they are survivors of violence. And I had a
Mhm,
role in being bedside and helping them recover. I always say that there was even one young man who was shot a total of 16 times and paralyzed waist down that I was able to support him in his healing as he was recovering from his gunshot wounds. I was able to see a whole lot. That's why my passion in violence, I'm so passionate about it, because kind of went from kind of preventing violence on school campuses
yeah.
to now preventing violence community wide. In short, I was able to transition to a national role with the Oakland based nonprofit Youth Alive. In
Mhm,
that role, was responsible for implementing training for a Department of Justice grant called Supporting Male Survivors of Violence. That initiative actually was started by Obama, President Obama's Attorney General Eric Holder, and it was exciting because I've always been South Sac, South Sac, South Sac,
yeah.
and this is one of my first opportunities to take my expertise beyond South Sacramento.
Mhm,
And I was able to, train folks all around the country that were implementing programming in regards to supporting male survivors and boys and men of color. So I would say a lot of my impact has to do with serving young people, but then
yeah.
also finding ways to implement evidence-based practices known
Mhm,
to prevent violence. And
yeah.
that's the irritating part, is that as we grieve off of Buffalo, as we grieve off of Texas, as we grieve off of tragedies locally that have been
Mhm,
happening honestly at the foundation of this country,
mhm,
there is evidence, there is data, and there's common sense policies out there that are just not happening. And I think
yeah.
that's the frustration, is that there is a solution, there can be a solution, there is hope, but there are folks that hold the power to do something that are not doing anything. I just hope that changes. But a lot of my impact, Renato, is around the field of education, community impact, violence prevention, and really convening and bringing people together to create solutions.
That's awesome. And I do want to make sure to shout you out specifically for our recent project, for the shop talks that we've done with IYT. I
Yeah,
know we can't talk too much into that because plot
yeah,
conflict of interest moving forward now. But
yeah.
for those that want to see some, at least Mr. Cooper here in action facilitating, you can check out the YouTube page, Improve Your Tomorrow, and check out those amazing shop talks with our community college students. It's been an amazing, amazing project that we're excited to continue. Um, I got about one or two more questions before we move on to the lightning round, one of my favorite segments. So, our next question here for you. Um, what is next for you as you think about kind of the future? I know you just got a new role and everything, but even outside your role, and continue to make the impact that you're doing, serving. What is next for you? What is the next venture that you're hoping to either get into or continue if you've already started? Just curious, man. What's next for Chris Cooper?
Yeah, no, this is exciting. I mean, that's really good that you say that. I did just recently transition into a statewide role that I'm super excited about that convenes funders around the state that are putting up investments and prioritizing, because we talked about prioritizing
Yeah.
boys and men of color. So super excited to work at the local foundation that I'm at. And it's interesting that you mentioned it, because as you are mentioning, like, in asking, what's my next step, I'm reminded of the current CEO that I have the privilege to work under his leadership. Um, During the final interview process, I remember him telling me, he said, he can't, talk boys and men of color if he can't be boys and men of color. And
Mm,
I found that so impactful, because here I am, I'm starting this, really amazing role that, our hope is to impact and advance boys and men of color throughout
right.
California. And he's there to offer me the role. He was actually there to interview me, but lucky enough, I was able to get he was able to offer me the role during that
Mhm.
time. And it was a really great interview. And I remember him saying, um, he said, at home, I need to be about boys and men of color.
Mm,
So when you're asking me what's next, I could say, hey, I want to write a book. I want to do this. I want to start that. I'm going to just say right now, what's next is being the best father that I possibly could be.
I love that.
That's what's next. We got a few weeks. I'm about to celebrate my first Father's Day, which I'm super
Hey.
excited about. So, I've spent so long developing my career and the things
Mhm.
that I do for the community and serving these kids and doing this and doing that and hopping on the lead up podcast with Fernando, right? I think what's next for me is really just getting this fatherhood stuff down,
Yeah.
because it's definitely it's completely easy having my wife. She's obviously the best mom in the world. Shout out to Jasmine. But then too, I really want to focus on and prioritize what's next, trying to be the best father that I could be. So who knows? With the
Yeah.
way the world's going right now, what's next is I might end up being an at-home school teacher. I don't know. So,
Hey. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Got you. Yeah, I love that. I love that answer, man. All right, last question here for you before we move into the lightning round. Um, just what's a practical hack tip, man, that you can give to our listeners on how they can lead up and kind of take the next steps? One thing that I'm very passionate about, and what I hope I'm doing through this platform of the podcast, is to encourage, motivate, inspire some folks that are tuning in to activate them to do something, right? I think it's one thing to feel encouraged and feel empowered, but how can we channel that now into some action, right, to get some things done, whether it's just one person, 100, or a whole community. So maybe a quick tip, quick advice that can help somebody lead up in their own season of their life and their journey.
yeah. I would say just stay coachable. Um, like this life is a game, and you got to remain coachable. So the common word is mentor,
Mm,
but I want you to find somebody that can actually coach you and give you some game that actually might be uncomfortable.
yeah.
Like, we all need somebody in our life that's going to have us on the edge. Like, we might not even like them, but we want to have somebody on our side that, like, we want to look back,
Yeah.
5 years from now. It's like, man, I really wanted to curse you out 5 years ago,
Yeah.
but today I get what you're saying. I get it. And
Yeah.
in light of the upcoming Father's Day, that's what my dad is for me. Growing up, I didn't know I needed my dad, right? But
Mm.
as a grown man, I'm like, yo, that's what my dad was trying to say when I was 10 years old. I hated him for it. I'm like, yo, why is he doing this? Like, why is
Yeah.
he like that? So I would say my gym and my hack is always have a coach in your corner.
Yeah.
If you call the mentor, great, but you're gonna need someone in your life, or I encourage you to have someone in your life that's gonna make you feel the burn. Make
Yeah.
it can be a personal trainer,
Hmm.
It can be a mentor. It can be an annoying uncle. Have somebody. I would just
Yeah,
I'll leave you with that. Is make sure that you remain coachable and find a coach. I hope that does it, Renato.
it does, coach, as you call
Yep.
me. All
Yeah.
right, man. So
Who started calling
I'm
coach
pretty
first?
I'm pretty sure you did, because I'm the
Okay.
type of guy. If someone calls me like a new name, I kind of just go with it. So you're like, you got it, coach. I was like, okay, coach. So
Okay.
just
Good.
wanted to keep the same energy. But yeah, but I got another question here for you. Are you ready for the lightning round, sir?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay, the lightning round again. Set of questions that I did not share with you beforehand. First answer that
Mhm.
comes to mind as quickly as possible. All right, so let's jump into it. First one, pretty simple. Favorite food spot in Sacramento?
OZ Korean barbecue.
I love it. Your next international travel is to where?
Ooh, Paris.
Paris. Okay. Artist or song that is currently on repeat?
Kendrick Lamar, Die Hard.
Love it. What's a pet peeve?
You're wearing socks and you step in a puddle of water.
Oof. Yeah. All right. I
Woo.
want you to finish this statement here. Sacramento is.
Weird.
Oh man. Next one. Will the Niners make the playoffs this year?
Indubitably.
That's my man right there. Okay. Uh, who's funnier, you or your wife?
Obviously me.
Oh, obviously. All right. Hope
Yeah.
I didn't say it. He did. All right. Something that most people wouldn't know about you.
I actually got expelled from middle school twice. Got expelled from 7th grade and 8th grade.
What?
Yep.
Okay.
I switched
Well, you
schools twice.
can you share just a little bit? I'm always
Yeah.
curious about these ones.
Yeah. So one I'll keep confidential, but
Okay.
I was being bullied in 7th grade. I retaliated by returning the pencil that was thrown at my head. And when I
Uh-huh.
returned it, it gashed a kid a little bit in his forehead. And
Oh,
I was put up for expulsion hearing and I didn't return to the
wow.
district after that. My dad shipped me out to Arizona with my mom and actually got in trouble there and wasn't able to finish the complete school year there. And then I
Wow.
returned back, and instead of going to Valley High School, ended up going to Sac High.
Interesting. Wow. We're gonna have to talk offline about that one. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
Next one. Best advice someone has given you.
Ooh. Um, I, I would say that understanding that people evolve, accept that people evolve. Like I
Mm,
would say that at least that's what comes to my mind.
yep. Worst nickname given to you.
Ooh. Um, I don't know. I feel like everybody's always called me. I don't
Coop?
know.
Cooper?
I don't think that I mess with Coop. I mess
Oh,
with Coop.
no one's ever called you Coop.
No. People have called me Coop, but I like it. But you said worst nickname, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Nah, I don't know if I have. I mean, weirdo. I mean, people definitely call me weird. I don't, I guess that's a common nickname or another
Yeah,
name that a lot of
I
folks call
got
me
you.
that I'm not a fan of, but I embrace it.
I got you. All right, last two here. Biggest lesson you learned so far in 2022.
Oh, um, I would honestly say, um, I would say the lesson that I've learned this year is kind of the same lesson I've learned in the past throughout honestly the whole pandemic is that honestly when you're against the wall, that doesn't mean that there's not an opportunity. So I would say the biggest lesson I've learned is that in times of tragedy, in times to where things seem scarce, that's actually an opportunity for growth. So I would
Mm,
say that's the biggest opportunity because I've experienced a lot of growth the past couple of years, but it's
yeah,
also been a trying year for a lot of folks too. So I would say that that's been a lesson is when you're against the wall, you still have an opportunity for growth.
got you. Last but not least, to close us off for the lightning round, finish the statement. Every leader needs what?
Love, love,
Love. Love.
love.
You
I
heard
don't
it
know if
here.
somebody, I don't know if somebody else has said that before, but I'm gonna say love.
I love it. And I love you, Chris Cooper. Thank you all
Love you
for
too, bro.
tuning in. That is the Lead Up Podcast. We'll catch you on the next episode. Peace.